David Harrison just parked in his own driveway, and Karen, the neighborhood HOA fanatic, immediately called the cops on him. She strutted onto his porch, chest puffed up, insisting he was breaking the rules, as if she had the right to control the entire street. But David had a secret that flipped everything upside down. He wasn't just a resident. He was the elected mayor, and only when the truth came out did the crowd see her authority crumble. But just wait until you see how this shocking twist played out and why justice in the end completely prevailed. It was one of those evenings when all you really want is a quiet moment at home. I had just wrapped up a long, exhausting day at work. My head was pounding from meetings, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, and traffic on the way back had been unbearable. So when I finally pulled into my neighborhood, all I could think was, at last, peace. For the first time that entire week, there was actually a clear spot right in front of my garage. Normally, I had to leave my car on the street because of deliveries, kids' bikes, or guests visiting. But this time, a perfect open driveway waiting for me. Honestly, it felt like a small victory. The kind of thing that makes you exhale and think, okay, today might not be so bad after all. I parked my car neatly, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a second, enjoying the silence. No noise, no phone calls, no stress. Just me and the comfort of home. I grabbed my bag, stepped inside, and thought I was finally done with the world for the day. But no, not even 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. At first, I thought maybe it was a delivery I forgot about, or maybe a neighbor dropping something off. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I opened the door, and that's when I saw her. Karen. Every neighborhood seems to have a Karen. Ours? Well, she's legendary. A woman in her 50s who practically treats the entire block like it's her personal kingdom. She knows everyone's schedules, what cars belong to who, and she loves pointing out when somebody's grass is too long or when trash cans aren't lined up just the way she thinks they should be. Honestly, I had managed to stay out of her radar most of the time, until that moment. She stood there on my porch, arms crossed so tightly, it looked like she was holding herself back from exploding. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and she gave me that stare, the one that makes you feel like you're back in grade school and the teacher caught you passing notes in class. Without even saying hello, she barked out the words, "You're not allowed to park there. This violates HOA rules." I blinked, honestly thinking I must have misheard her. Parking in my own driveway? Against the rules. That didn't even make sense. I tried to open my mouth to ask what she meant, but she didn't give me the chance. Her hand shot into her pocket, and before I could process what was happening, she already had her phone out. In one sharp motion, she held it up like it was a weapon. "That's it. I'm calling the cops. Right now." I just stood there, stunned. My mind was racing but completely blank at the same time. How do you even respond to that? I wasn't blocking traffic. I wasn't breaking any law. I was literally standing on my own property, in front of my own garage, with my own car. And yet, here she was, ready to get law enforcement involved, over something that should never even be a question. It felt surreal, almost like a bad sitcom playing out in real life. I remember thinking, is this actually happening? Is someone seriously calling the police on me for parking at my own house? And that was the exact moment when I realized this wasn't going to be a quiet evening. This was just the beginning of something much bigger. About 15 minutes later, I heard the low rumble of a patrol car pulling up outside my house. I peeked out the window and, sure enough, a police cruiser had arrived. Lights off, but engine idling. I could see the officer stepping out slowly, clearly trying to take in the situation without overreacting. I swear, even from inside, I could feel his eyebrow twitch in mild disbelief. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. He approached the driveway, notebook in hand, and asked politely but with a hint of hesitation, "Sir, is it true you're parking here illegally?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could say a single word, Karen took over. She stepped forward, chest puffed up like she was on some kind of stage, pointing her finger straight at me. Her voice cut through the quiet evening like a whistle. "He always does whatever he wants, thinks he's above the rules. People like him need to be punished." I froze for a moment, just watching. The absurdity of the situation made it hard to breathe normally. But what really got under my skin wasn't her words. It was the tone. That voice dripping with self-righteousness. The way she looked at me as if she had single-handedly been tasked with maintaining moral order in the universe. This wasn't about enforcing rules. This wasn't about neighborhood order or even safety. It was about her ego. Then I looked up and noticed something even stranger. Neighbors were starting to gather. At first, just a few curious faces peeking from behind fences and blinds, but slowly, a small crowd began forming on the sidewalk. And here's the thing. I could feel their eyes on us, but not in the way I expected. They weren't upset with me. They weren't even whispering about the car. No. They were looking at Karen. They were staring at her like she had just interrupted everyone's evening with a combination of paranoia and overzealous authority. Her voice grew louder, sharper, almost theatrical now. She leaned slightly toward the officer, emphasizing every word with exaggerated gestures. Every syllable seemed designed not just to report me, but to dominate me, to humiliate me in front of the street. And that's when I felt it. A slow, boiling anger that wasn't just annoyance. It was pure hatred. Not the kind you want to act on violently, but the kind that fills you with fire inside. It was hatred for the arrogance, for the assumption that she could control the world around her with her phone and her tiny little HOA badge. For the complete lack of awareness that she wasn't some moral authority. She was just another neighbor, no more important than anyone else. I clenched my fists at my sides, took a few calming breaths, and forced myself to focus. I knew I couldn't let her antics get the better of me. I also knew the crowd was watching, and somehow, in the pit of my stomach, I realized that they could probably sense the ridiculousness too. That moment, staring at her, hearing her loud, high-pitched accusations, watching neighbors exchange confused and amused glances, it was infuriating, but it also made something clear. This wasn't just about me parking my car. This was about someone trying to assert power they didn't actually have. And inside, that understanding only made my anger burn hotter. The tension in the air was almost palpable. The officer shifted slightly on his feet, glancing from Karen to me and back again like he couldn't believe he had actually been called to handle this. Karen, on the other hand, was brimming with confidence, standing as tall as she could, chest out, chin high, as if she were about to declare herself the supreme ruler of the street. "I'm a member of the HOA board," she announced loudly, gesturing with one hand while the other remained firmly planted on her hip. "I represent all the residents. This man is violating the rules and must be fined." Her words echoed across the street, and I could feel the crowd stiffen with anticipation. Some neighbors whispered to each other, exchanging incredulous glances, while others simply leaned on their fences, watching the drama unfold. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I wanted to interrupt, to shout, to tell her she had no right to talk to me like that. But I knew losing my cool would only feed her ego. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate breath. My hand moved to my pocket and I pulled out my ID. The movement was calm, deliberate, almost theatrical, and I handed it to the officer without a word at first. Then I spoke, my voice steady but firm, carrying clearly across the small crowd. "My name is David Harrison. I'm not just a resident here. I am the elected mayor of this municipality." Karen froze for a split second. I could see her eyes widen, her lips parting slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. I continued. "The HOA rules you keep waving around were approved by me and the city council. Parking in your own driveway is a basic, non-negotiable right. So the only one disrupting order here is standing right in front of you." The reaction was instantaneous. You could almost hear the collective gasp of the neighbors, like someone had popped a balloon of tension in the middle of the street. The officer hesitated for a moment, clearly trying to process the chain of authority and what it meant in this ridiculous scenario. Karen's face shifted from confidence to shock, and then to a flicker of anger. The kind of anger you feel when your carefully built illusion of control crumbles in an instant. Inside me, anger surged, but it was different now. It wasn't the raw, simmering frustration from earlier. This was purposeful, focused, and controlled. I wasn't just angry at her anymore. I was angry at the principle of people thinking they could dominate others with a badge or a phone call. I was angry that someone could so casually assume power over an entire neighborhood without understanding the rules, the context, or the reality of the community. As I looked at the crowd, I realized something else. They weren't just watching, they were witnessing the truth. They could see the absurdity of her actions and the authority I held, and I knew in that moment that justice wasn't just about rules on paper. It was about respect, clarity, and standing up for what's right. The anger had transformed into something stronger now. It was clarity. It was purpose. It was empowerment. And in that charged, electric moment, I knew the situation was about to turn completely. The tension that had hung over the street for the past hour seemed to crackle in the evening air. Karen, still fuming and pointing fingers, looked like she was about to erupt again. But the officer, who had been silently observing the absurdity of the scene, finally spoke, his voice firm and steady. "Ma'am, this is not a police matter, and if you keep calling us over false complaints, you could face fines." The words hit the air like a hammer. I could see her blink, then recoil slightly, her mouth opening and closing as if she were searching for a comeback that simply didn't exist. The crowd, who had been holding their collective breath, started reacting. Whispers turned into chuckles, and then into laughter. Someone from across the street shouted, "Let's see her try to boss us around now." Karen's confident posture faltered. Her face went pale and her hands dropped to her sides. She pivoted sharply on her heel and marched back toward her house, muttering something under her breath that nobody really heard. The door slammed behind her, leaving silence that was strangely peaceful, almost celebratory. I turned to the neighbors who had gathered, their eyes wide, their expressions a mix of relief and amusement. I could feel the weight of the moment, the realization that what had started as a ridiculous conflict had turned into a clear, unmistakable victory. I stepped forward slightly, raising my voice just enough to reach everyone. "I've always been for order, but real order means respecting each other, not constant tattling and threats." Heads nodded, Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, and someone even laughed, shaking their head at the absurdity of the whole situation. In that moment, the street felt different. It felt lighter. The invisible tension Karen had been imposing on everyone had vanished, replaced by a quiet sense of relief and community solidarity. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling a wave of calm satisfaction wash over me. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I allowed myself to relax. This wasn't just about parking in a driveway. It was about standing up to someone who thought rules were only for others, someone who believed a title, a badge, or a phone call could override common sense and fairness. The neighbors lingered for a few moments, exchanging smiles, shaking heads, and quietly commenting about how unbelievable the situation had been. I noticed small gestures of appreciation, a thumbs up from Mrs. Jensen down the street, a nod from the Martinez family, little confirmations that justice had been witnessed, that truth had prevailed. That night, as I closed my garage door and finally stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Pure satisfaction. It wasn't loud or boisterous. It was quiet, steady, a calm sense of victory. Justice had been restored. Karen had learned, at least for a moment, that her theatrics and self-appointed authority had limits, and the entire street had seen it. I leaned back in my chair, looked out the window at the quiet street, and smiled. In the end, sometimes the loudest voices don't win. The ones who respect fairness, clarity, and real authority do. That night, I slept knowing the street was a little freer, a little lighter, and a little more just. And that was more satisfying than any small victory could ever be.